People ask me, how do you mourn a child who isn't dead? I don't know. I only know that there are screams that never escape your chest and wounds that have never stopped bleeding for 40 years. For 40 long years, I have lived like a ghost in my own home, clinging to a silent sorrow that no one could understand. It all began with a lie so gentle, so cruel. It tore my life to shreds. "Let me give him a quick bath," she said. And then, she took my son. She took my entire world. I am Eleanor, and this is the story of the 40 years I spent searching for the sunlight that was stolen from my life. If you are listening, wherever you are on this planet, from a small village in Asia, a bustling city in Europe, or a quiet town in the Americas, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Let me know that a mother's heart has overcome 40 years of solitude to reach you. Because the pain of losing a child knows no language, no borders, and a mother's cry, no matter how silent, deserves to be heard by the whole world. He was so tiny, it felt like he could fit inside my apron, you know? My dear, having a child back then wasn't as easy as it is today. There was no such thing as ultrasounds, monthly prenatal checkups, vitamins for this and that. It was all based on experience, on midwives, and on faith in God. When I found out I was expecting, it was a huge shock. I was already 40, an age where I thought I couldn't get pregnant anymore. I had been working at Walter's Pharmacy since I was a young woman, never been officially married. Robert, my son's father, was a long-haul truck driver, spent more time on the road than at home. We cared for each other, but it wasn't some epic romance, you understand? When I told him about the pregnancy, at first he was silent. Then he said he was going out for cigarettes, and vanished. I never heard from him again. I found out later he already had another family somewhere around Phoenix. It was hard, you know. A lot of people in town turned their backs on me, an older, single, and pregnant woman. They whispered behind my back. The pregnancy was complicated. I had high blood pressure. I swelled up like a croissant in the oven. My feet got so swollen I had to drag my legs to walk. I worked until the 8th month because I needed the money. Mr. Walter was good to me. He let me sit on a stool behind the counter when there were no customers. The birth was at home. Back then, here in Malibu, you only went to the hospital if you were dying or if you had money. I had neither. I called Miss Beatrice, the most famous home birth attendant in the area. She had already brought half the town into the world. The pain started at dawn, a pain that felt like it would split me in two. I bit the pillow so I wouldn't scream and wake the neighbors. Miss Beatrice arrived, lit candles, made some herbal tea to help, and told me to hang in there. "A single mother's child comes with more strength," she said, and it seems he did. It was almost 15 hours of suffering. When James finally decided to be born, it was well into the evening. I remember there was a full moon. The light came through the window and shone right on the bed. It was like something out of a movie. When Miss Beatrice placed him in my arms, all wet, reddish, crying with all his might, that's when I understood what true love was. Everything I had been through, the shame, the abandonment, the pain, it was all worth it just for that moment. He weighed 7 pounds, had a nose just like his father's, but the rest of him looked just like me. The first few days were endlessly tiring. He nursed every 3 hours, like clockwork. I barely slept. There were nights I cried along with him from sheer exhaustion. But then he'd give that toothless smile, hold my finger with his tiny hand, and everything would be okay. His smell. Oh, my dear, there's no explaining it. A baby's smell is the most wonderful thing in the world. I used to put Johnson's baby powder on him after his bath. That sweet scent would linger in the air all day. Sometimes, when I was at the pharmacy, I'd smell it from afar, as if he were close to me. He was a good baby, only cried when he was hungry or wet. He smiled at everyone, even the neighbor's dog that barked all day. He had the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen. It was like he understood everything. He was so clever. At 6 months, he was already crawling all over the house, getting into everything, opening drawers, pulling the tablecloth. A little firecracker. At 7 months, he said his first word, "Mama." My heart soared. I had been waiting for that sound for what felt like a lifetime. It was the sweetest word I had ever heard. I wrote down every little thing he did in a notebook. First word, first tooth, first burp, everything. I would take him to the pharmacy sometimes when I had no one to leave him with. I'd put a little mattress behind the counter, and he'd stay there playing with a rattle while I helped customers. Everyone would stop to make faces at him, give him kisses. The older ladies would say he was the spitting image of his father, and I would just smile. It wasn't worth explaining that the father didn't even know what his son looked like. Oh, and his smile when his first tooth came in, down on his bottom gum. He showed it to everyone, opening his little mouth and pointing with his finger. He was so proud of that single little tooth, he didn't even seem like a baby. He looked like a little old man showing off a medal. James loved music. When Fleetwood Mac played on the radio, he would wiggle his little body, even without knowing how to dance properly. I sang to him every night to get him to sleep. Those old lullabies my mother used to sing to me, like, "Hush, little baby." When his first birthday came. No, wait. He never made it to 1 year. He was just months old when it happened. Just months. He had barely started to live. That's why I needed help. I worked all day, had no relatives nearby. A neighbor could only watch him every now and then. That's when the volunteers from the Malibu Community Church recommended Catherine. They said she was trustworthy, that she took care of the orphans at the church. If I had known, if I had imagined for a second, I would have never let her into my house. I would have never let her hold my son. I would have never trusted her. But how could you guess? How could I have known that this girl with a saintly face, who prayed before meals, who spoke softly and treated my son with such affection, how could I have known she was going to destroy my life like that? If I had known it would last so little, I would have held on tighter, taken more photos, recorded his voice, kept more memories. But we always think we have all the time in the world, right? Until one day you find out you don't. And so, my little angel, who seemed to fit inside my apron, was taken from me, as if he were just a good dream that ended too quickly. She came through the church, said she had a calling for caregiving. It was Sister Margaret who brought her to my house on a Thursday morning. I remember it was drizzling, the kind of rain that gets you wetter than a downpour. James was 5 months old at the time. "Miss Eleanor, I brought someone who can help you with the baby," the volunteer said, serene as always. "She helps at the church's daycare. She has a real way with children." And there she was, standing at my door. Thin, medium height, straight black hair tied in a ponytail. She wore a simple light blue dress, long to her ankles. She wasn't a showstopper, but she had a pleasant face, big, dark eyes, and a shy smile. "A pleasure to meet you, ma'am. My name is Catherine Santos," she said in a soft voice, almost a whisper. She seemed afraid of her own shadow. "I'm 24 and I love taking care of children." Sister Margaret explained that Catherine had come from Santa Barbara, another city in California, about 6 months ago. She came to work as a helper in the church kitchen, but they soon realized she had a special gift with the children. "She has the hands of an angel," the volunteer guaranteed. The children calmed down with her. Just then, James started crying in his room. I was about to get up to check on him, but Sister Margaret said, "Let Catherine go so you can see her gift." I confess my heart tightened. It was the first time someone other than me was going to attend to my crying son. Catherine entered the room, and I peeked from the doorway. She approached the crib slowly, making soft cooing sounds with her mouth. "Hi, beautiful little boy," she said in a different, more melodious voice. "Why are you crying, huh? Are you hungry? Are you sleepy? Or do you just want to be held?" And would you believe it, James, who was a baby wary of strangers, stopped crying instantly. He looked at her with those big, curious eyes and even gave a little smile. When she picked him up, he snuggled into her as if he'd known her forever. That's when I decided to hire her. I paid her a little. It was what I could afford. She stayed with James during the day while I worked at the pharmacy, and sometimes helped with the housework too. In the beginning, she didn't sleep over. She'd leave in the late afternoon for a boarding house where she lived near the church. In the first few weeks, I confess I felt a pang of jealousy. My son, whom I carried in my belly, whom I breastfed, who was all mine, was now smiling for someone else. There were times he would cry with me but fall asleep in her arms. It broke my heart. But then I'd think, stop being silly, Eleanor. It's good that he likes the person who takes care of him. Catherine was a quiet girl. She spoke little about herself. When I asked about her family, she'd say she didn't have anyone. I was raised in an orphanage in Santa Barbara, she'd say. The volunteers were my family. Maybe that's why she had such a way with children. She knew what it was like to grow up without a mother and father. She was very religious, prayed before meals, went to service every Sunday. She always had a rosary in her apron pocket. Sometimes I'd catch her singing church hymns to put James to sleep. She had a beautiful, soft voice. Over time, she started to open up more, to feel more at ease in my house. She started giving me ideas for baby food that James might like, ways to make him sleep faster. And it worked. She seemed to understand my son better than I did sometimes. One day, I came home from work and found them both in the living room. She had spread some cushions on the floor and was lying next to him, showing him pictures in a storybook. James, who couldn't even talk yet, was pointing with his little finger and making sounds as if he were talking to her. They were both laughing, as if they understood some secret joke. At that moment, I felt something strange, as if that scene wasn't for me, as if I were peeking through the window at someone else's family. I shook my head to shake off that silly thought and walked in smiling. "Well, hello, my dears. Everything all right in here?" Catherine got up immediately, a bit embarrassed. "Oh, miss. Eleanor, I didn't see you arrive. We were just doing a little reading." James stretched his little arms out to me, and that tightness in my chest went away. After about 2 months of working at my house, just as I was getting completely used to her, Catherine asked if she could sleep over some nights. She said the landlady at the boarding house had raised the rent, and she was having trouble paying. "I can stay in that little back room, Miss Eleanor. You won't even notice I'm here." I felt sorry for her. The girl worked so hard, took such good care of my son, and was going through hardship. "Of course you can, Catherine. Make yourself at home." And that's how she started living at my house. Now that I think about it, maybe that was her plan from the beginning. To get closer slowly, gain my trust, until she was completely inside our lives. But at the time, I only saw a good, hard-working girl who adored my son and needed help. There was one night when James got sick, a high fever, crying non-stop. Catherine and I stayed up all night, taking turns holding him. When the fever finally broke, around 4 in the morning, we both cried with relief. That night, I felt like we were almost a family. Me, my son, and this girl who had entered our lives. She started buying little gifts for James. A colorful rattle, a little outfit, a pair of shoes. Simple, cheap things, but they showed affection. "You don't need to spend your money on this, Catherine," I'd say. And she'd reply, "It's just that I love him so much, Miss Eleanor. It's almost like he's mine." That phrase, "It's almost like he's mine," hammered in my head after everything happened. Because deep down, I think that's how she felt. That James was hers, that she deserved him more than I did. One day, I came home from work early and heard her in the room, talking to James as if he understood everything. "One day, we'll have our own little house, just ours," she was saying, thinking no one was listening. "It'll be just you and me, my little angel." I should have been suspicious then. I should have seen the signs. But how can you distrust someone who took care of him with so much love? How could I imagine that this sweet-faced girl was planning the cruelest thing in the world? In the weeks before the disappearance, Catherine started asking strange questions. If I had James's documents saved, if I had many photos of him, if anyone from his father's family knew the baby. At the time, I answered without much thought, thinking it was just curiosity. Now I know she was preparing everything, planning every detail, waiting for the right moment. And the moment came on that Sunday when she said, "I'll give him a quick bath, Miss Eleanor." "You look tired," she told me. "I'll give him a quick bath." She took the towel and went. It was the last time I saw them both. It feels like it was yesterday. This memory is so vivid in my mind. It was a Sunday, the 15th of January, 1983, a date I've never forgotten. The day started like any other Sunday. I woke up early, as always. Even on a day of rest, any mother knows there's no day off. James would wake up with the sun, around 6 a.m. He was 7 months old, crawling all over the house, wanting to touch everything. I made him some oatmeal cereal that he loved. Then I put him on the living room floor with some toys while I washed the breakfast dishes. Catherine was still sleeping. On weekends, I let her rest more. Poor thing. During the week, she woke up with me to take care of James while I got ready for work. I remember Fleetwood Mac was playing on the neighbor's radio. She always turned it up loud on Sunday mornings. The song was Dreams. To this day, I can't hear that song without feeling a tightness in my chest. The day was hot, that kind of January heat that sticks to your skin. I was wearing a light blue cotton dress, a simple house dress. I had tied my hair in a ponytail to keep my neck cool. James was just in a diaper and a little t-shirt, his chubby little legs out. Around 9 a.m., Catherine appeared in the kitchen. She always woke up with her hair perfectly neat. I never understood how. I looked like a witch in the morning, and she always looked like she'd just left the salon. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor. Let me feed the baby his cereal," she offered, helpful as always. "I already did, Catherine. He ate it all, thank God. He's in the living room playing." She went straight to the living room, as if she had missed him just from sleeping one night. I heard her cooing, "Good morning, my prince. Did you sleep well? Did you miss your Auntie Catherine?" James let out that wonderful baby laugh when he saw her, clapping his little hands with joy. It gave me a silly pang of jealousy, but at the same time, it made me happy to see my son so happy. The morning went on peacefully. I tidied up the kitchen, swept the house, started sorting the laundry. Every Sunday I did laundry. It was my day. Back then, there was no machine. It was all in the sink, by hand. Meanwhile, Catherine stayed with James in the living room, playing, telling him stories. Around noon, I made a simple lunch, a simple chicken and vegetable soup. Nothing special, but Catherine always praised my cooking. "You cook so well, Miss Eleanor." At the orphanage, the food was tasteless. After lunch, Catherine offered to wash the dishes while I took a nap. But I had that pile of laundry waiting, and the sky was already getting a bit overcast, threatening rain. "I'm going to take advantage and wash these clothes before it rains," I said. "James needs a bath. When I'm done, I'll bathe him." That's when she said those words that have never left my mind. "Don't worry, Miss Eleanor. You already work so much. I'll give him a quick bath. You go hang the clothes, and when you get back, he'll be all clean and fresh." I didn't think twice. Why would I? She had bathed him dozens of times. It was our normal routine. I thanked her, gave a kiss on my son's forehead, who was in her lap, and went to the yard with the laundry basket. It must have been around 2 p.m. The sun was strong, but there was a nice breeze. I started hanging the clothes on the line, humming softly, thinking about the week ahead, the bills to pay, the ordinary things in life. I can't say how long I was out there. Maybe 20 minutes, no more. When I went back inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. A strange, heavy silence. Usually, at bath time, James made the biggest mess. He loved water, would splash his little hands, sending water everywhere. You could hear his laughter and Catherine's voice talking to him even from the yard. But that day, nothing. Total silence. "Catherine," I called, entering the living room. No one answered. "James, where are you?" I tried again, a little louder. I went to the bathroom, thinking they'd be there. But the door was open, the light off. The little blue plastic tub I used to bathe him was dry, stored in the corner. There was no sign that anyone had taken a bath there. A chill ran up my spine. I ran to James's room. The little bed was empty, the toys untouched. "Catherine!" I shouted, louder now, my heart starting to pound. I went to her room in the back of the house. The door was open, the bed made as if no one had slept in it, but something was different. The dresser drawers were slightly open. I looked inside. Empty. Her clothes were gone. The small suitcase she brought when she came to live with us was also gone. I ran back to James's room, now desperate. I opened his wardrobe. Clothes were missing. Not all of them, but the nicer ones, the ones I had bought with so much sacrifice. The pouch where I kept his documents was also gone. It was in that moment that I understood, and I fell to my knees on the floor. She had taken my son. She had planned everything. Waited for me to go to the yard, grabbed the thing she must have already packed, and disappeared with my baby. I ran out into the street, barefoot, screaming like a madwoman. The neighbors came out to see what was happening. I could only scream. She took my son. Catherine took my James. Someone called the police. Someone made me sit down, gave me water. I was trembling so much I couldn't hold the glass. I was sobbing, unable to breathe properly. I was never the same after that day. I never slept a full night again. I never truly smiled again. I didn't have a single clear photo of Catherine. Back then, it wasn't like today where everyone takes pictures of everything. I had very few photos of James, taken with those film cameras you had to get developed. She was in the background of one, blurry and out of focus. It was useless for an identification. The police said they had nothing to go on. The police asked what she looked like, where she might have gone. I knew nothing. She said she was from Santa Barbara, but who could guarantee that was true? She said she was raised in an orphanage, but which one? She never mentioned the name. She never spoke of relatives, of friends, of anything. They searched her little room and found nothing that could give them a clue. Not a piece of paper, not an address, nothing. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere and disappeared the same way. But taking what was most precious to me. To this day, when I hear running water, I tremble. The sound of water reminds me of that day, of the excuse she used to get me away from my son. I'll give him a quick bath. Simple words that changed my life forever. And the worst part is, for a long time, I blamed myself. If I hadn't gone to hang the clothes, if I had been suspicious, if I had paid more attention to the signs, maybe my son would still be with me. But we don't live on what ifs, do we? We live with what happened, no matter how painful it is. And what happened was that on an ordinary Sunday afternoon, my son disappeared, as if swallowed by the world, without a trace. And there began the darkest phase of my life, a darkness that lasted 40 years. They said it was all in my head, that I sold him, that I was negligent. People can be cruel, you know, especially when they don't know the pain you're feeling inside. After Catherine disappeared with my James, I thought everyone would help me search, that the whole town would mobilize to find an innocent baby who was taken from his own mother. But that's not quite what happened. The police came, of course. There were only 2 officers back then, Sergeant Miller and Officer Baker. They wrote everything down in a little notebook, asked the basic questions. What she looked like, where she might have gone, if I had a photo of her, what our relationship was like. But you could already tell by the way they looked at each other that they didn't really believe my story. Sergeant Miller even said, "Are you sure this girl didn't just go out for a walk with the boy? Maybe she'll be back soon." As if someone who goes for a walk takes all their clothes and the child's documents. They went to the Malibu Community Church to find out more about Catherine. And that's when the first surprise came. No one there really knew her. Sister Margaret, who had brought her to my house, said that Catherine had shown up one day asking for work, saying she had been raised in an orphanage in Santa Barbara. She had good references from another charity, the volunteer explained. She helped in the kitchen for a few months, was quiet, hardworking. When you needed someone to take care of the baby, we thought she would be suitable. But no one had checked if her story was true. No one knew her full last name. No one had the address of the supposed orphanage where she said she was raised. Nothing. The police sent a teletype to Santa Barbara asking about orphanages in the region that might have a former resident named Catherine. Weeks later, the answer came back. There was no record of any Catherine matching the description we gave. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air and vanished the same way. Like a ghost who entered my life just to take what was most precious to me. Meanwhile, the town began to whisper. First, it was hushed tones, sideways glances when I walked by. Then came the blatant gossip that reached me through well-intentioned neighbors. Miss Eleanor, They're saying you sold the boy to the girl. I heard you mistreated the nanny, and she ran away with the baby to protect him. Some people are saying you made up the whole story, that the boy died and you don't want to admit it. Each version was more absurd than the last. I, who had always been a respected woman in town, suddenly became the subject of gossip, of fingers pointed at me on the street. The worst was when the local paper published an article about the case. It was a small paper that circulated in the neighboring towns. The headline read, "Baby disappears in Malibu, mother is prime suspect." What do you mean I was a suspect? A suspect of what? Of having my child stolen? Of having my heart broken into 1,000 pieces? The article insinuated that I might have done away with the baby and invented the story about the nanny. It said that neighbors, without naming names of course, had heard arguments at the house, that I was always nervous, stressed. It said I was a single mother, as if that were some kind of crime. I'll never forget the rage I felt reading that. It was the only time despair gave way to another feeling. I took the newspaper, went to the editor's office, and threw it in his face. "How dare you publish these lies? How can you sleep at night knowing you're slandering a mother who lost her child?" The man was embarrassed but didn't apologize. He said they were just reporting the facts according to their sources. What sources? Malicious gossips who had nothing better to do. The volunteers from the church also abandoned me. They, who had brought Catherine to my house, who had guaranteed she was trustworthy, now said they didn't know her that well, that they were also deceived. Sister Margaret even told me, in that gentle voice of hers, "Perhaps it is God's will, my child. Perhaps He has other plans for your boy." What kind of God was this who would rip a child from his mother's arms? What divine plan was this that used a deceitful woman to cause so much suffering? I lost my faith for a while. I couldn't pray anymore. I didn't go to service anymore. How could I trust a God who allowed such an injustice? A few weeks after the disappearance, the police practically closed the search. "We have no concrete leads, Miss Eleanor," the sergeant said. "The girl could have gone anywhere in the country, and without a photo of her, it's hard to search." I begged, I cried, I knelt before him. "For the love of God, don't give up on my son. He's just a baby. He needs his mother." The sergeant looked at me with pity. That look of pity was almost worse than the accusations. "We'll keep the case open, but you need to be realistic. It's been almost 2 months. If she crossed the border into Mexico, for example, it's almost impossible to track her." It was then that I realized I was alone in this fight. No one was going to find my son for me. No one truly believed I would succeed. I fell into a deep depression. I stopped eating, sleeping, living. I spent my days sitting in the rocking chair in James's room, holding his teddy bear, looking at the empty crib. At night, I'd go to bed with one of his little outfits, smelling the scent that still lingered on the fabric. Mr. Walter, the pharmacy owner, was one of the few who supported me. He kept my job for me, even though I didn't show up for work for months. "When you feel ready, your place will be here," he said. It was a gesture of kindness I'll never forget. A neighbor, Mrs. Linda, also stood by me. She brought me food, forced me to eat at least a little, cleaned the house I had abandoned. "You need to keep living, Eleanor," she'd say. "If your boy comes back one day, he'll want to find his mother well, not a ghost." But most people distance themselves. I think other people's pain is frightening, you know? It makes us think it could happen to us too. And no one wants to imagine such suffering. I started receiving anonymous letters. Some saying they had seen my son in such and such a place, others accusing me of horrible things, others saying he was dead and I should move on. I followed every lead, no matter how absurd it seemed. I spent what little money I had on trips to neighboring towns, following rumors that never led to anything. The worst part was when people looked at me with that poor thing expression and said, "It's been so long, you need to accept it." How do you accept that your child was stolen? How do you give up looking for the person you love most in the world? Only a mother understands this pain. It's like having a piece of you ripped out, the most vital, most essential piece. It's a wound that bleeds every day, that never closes. If you're a mother too, share this video. Because only those who have given birth understand. Only those who have felt a child grow inside their womb. Only those who have breastfed. Only those who have spent sleepless nights rocking a sick baby. Only that person knows what it's like to have a child stolen. This video isn't just my story. It's a cry for all the mothers who have gone through or are going through the same nightmare. So that no one else has to hear. You sold him. You were negligent. You made it all up. Because I know the truth. And now, you know it too. My house became a museum for a baby who never grew up. It's strange how we keep on living even when it feels like the world has ended. The sun keeps rising, people keep working, life goes on. But you're stuck in a moment that doesn't pass. After about 6 months, I had to go back to work. Not by choice, but by necessity. The bills were piling up, the rent was late, the fridge was empty. Mr. Walter, the pharmacy owner, welcomed me with open arms. He had kept my spot at the counter, just as he promised. It was hard to get back into the routine. People would come into the pharmacy and not know whether to bring up the subject or pretend nothing had happened. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. Those with small children even seemed afraid to let their kids near me, as if my tragedy were contagious. I smiled, served everyone politely, wrapped their medications carefully, but inside, I was dead. Completely dead. When I got home, I'd go straight to James's room. I didn't change a thing. The crib with its bars remained in the same place, with the little bear print sheet I'd bought on sale. The toys were arranged on the shelf that Mr. Tony, the carpenter, had made as a gift when the baby was born. Open the wardrobe, you'll see. Everything is saved. His clothes, in the size he was when he disappeared, and some larger ones I had bought thinking about the future. The little shoes he never got to wear because he was still crawling. The colorful rattle he loved, the one that made him laugh every time I shook it. This one was his favorite, a brown teddy bear, a bit faded now. He used to sleep clutching this bear every night. When Catherine took him, she left the bear behind. For the first few years, I slept with this bear, smelling my son's scent on it. But over time, the scent faded. Only the memory remained. The little blue tub is also stored away, the one that should have been used on the day of the disappearance but was dry when I came back from the yard. I never used it again for anything. It stayed there, frozen in time, waiting for a baby who wouldn't return. I lived with guilt and questions. If I hadn't gone to hang the clothes, if I had been suspicious of Catherine, if I had been more attentive, would my son still be with me? This what-if haunted me day and night. It gave me no peace. There were nights I'd wake up screaming, dreaming that James was crying and I couldn't reach him. Other dreams were worse. I'd find him, grown up, but he wouldn't recognize me, wouldn't want to come with me. And the most frequent one of all, I'd dream of him, but always with his face covered or blurry, as if my own son was fading from my memory. I tried to imagine what he'd be like at each stage. When he turned 5, I thought, now he'd be starting school. At 10, I wonder if he likes to play baseball like his father did. At 15, what does his voice sound like now that he's a young man? And so on. A lifetime of suppositions, of moments that never happened. People said I should move on. Some even suggested I have another child. You're still young, Eleanor. You can start another family. As if one child could replace another. As if I could simply forget James and start over. I had a few suitors over the years. Good, hard-working men who might have made me happy under different circumstances. But I never could. My heart was locked, guarding the grief for a baby the world wanted me to forget. Instead of a new love, I spent my time and money searching for my son. Any news of a found child, any lead on women passing themselves off as mothers of stolen children, I would follow up. I'd save up my money and travel to other cities, following rumors that always led to nothing. The worst were the anonymous letters. They started arriving a couple of years after the disappearance. Some seemed to be from people who wanted to help, giving information about children who looked like the description of James. Others were clearly from malicious people wanting to give me false hope or torment me even more. I saw your son in San Diego with a woman with black hair. There's a boy here in Phoenix who is the spitting image of yours. Give up looking. Your son is better off without you. The nanny took him to Mexico. They're living on a farm. I checked every one of these leads. I spent all the money I had saved, sold jewelry that belonged to my mother, took out loans from the bank, all to follow any tiny chance of finding my son. Once, I traveled 12 hours by bus to Phoenix because I received a letter saying there was a boy in an orphanage who could be James. When I got there, I saw that the boy was the same age, but he looked nothing like my son. Blue eyes, blonde hair, completely different. I cried so much on the bus back that a strange lady hugged me and prayed for me. I became almost a joke in town. There goes Eleanor, chasing another false lead. The meaner kids would even follow me down the street, chanting, "Where's the baby?" The witch ate him. It was a very difficult, very humiliating time, but I never gave up. Never. Hope was the only thing that kept me alive. The hope that one day, somewhere, I would find my son. I made an altar with his photo in my room. The best photo I had, him at 8 months, sitting on a blanket on the living room floor, smiling with those 2 little teeth that had just come in. I'd light candles, put out flowers, and pray every day. Not that he was dead, but that wherever he was loved and well cared for. There were days I would talk to the photo as if he could hear me. I'd tell him about my day, about the town news. I'd say how much I missed him. It was a way of keeping him alive in my heart, of not letting the memory fade with time. People stopped talking about it. The town moved on, as small towns do. Other scandals, other gossip took the place of the missing baby case. But for me, time had stopped on that Sunday in January, 1983. I grew old. My dark hair turned white. My smooth hands got wrinkled. My once strong body stooped with age and the weight of sadness. But somewhere in America, my son was also growing up, becoming a boy, then a man, without knowing who his real mother was, without knowing his story. I lost my parents. I lost friends. I saw the city change, modernize. Walter's pharmacy closed when he died. A big CVS opened in its place. The church also closed down and became a community center. Everything changed, except for the pain I carried. I retired at 65. I had saved a little, enough to live simply. I stayed in the same house, the house where it all happened. Many people asked why I didn't move, why I continued to live in a place that brought so many painful memories. The answer was simple. What if one day he came back? What if, by some miracle, my son discovered the truth and came looking for me? He would need to know where to find his mother. That's why I never moved. I never changed my phone number. I never abandoned hope. Living in waiting like this is like always holding your breath halfway. You can't fully fill your lungs. You can't let all the air out. You're stuck in the middle, neither fully living nor completely dead. But after 40 years of living like this, something happened. Something that not even in my most optimistic dreams I imagined was possible. A sign, a clue, a chance to finally discover the truth. And it all started with an ordinary television show on a random Tuesday afternoon. On the television, his gaze pierced through me like a lightning bolt. It was something I can't even explain properly, as if my heart had recognized him before my mind did. It was an ordinary Tuesday in 2023. I was already 81 years old, long retired. My life was simple. I'd wake up early, make my coffee, water the little plants in the yard. Sometimes I'd go to service, chat with the neighbors. The quiet life of an old woman who carried an ancient sorrow but had learned to live with it. That day, a show was on television, one of those afternoon shows that tell stories of people looking for relatives. I liked to watch, even knowing it was bad for me. I always had the silly hope that one day, who knows, my James might appear on a show like that, looking for his mother. I was in my armchair in the living room, crocheting. I do it to distract my mind. When a story began about a man looking for his biological mother, the reporter explained that he had been raised by a woman who claimed to be a former church volunteer, but now, after she passed away, he discovered he might not be her biological son. I didn't even look up at first. I had seen so many stories like that. But then the man started to speak, and his voice caught my attention. I looked at the screen and, my God, His face had something all too familiar. The eyes, especially. They were Robert's eyes, my son's father. That same shape, that same expression. And the nose. It was my James's little nose, but in an adult version. My crochet needle fell to the floor. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't even grab the remote to turn up the volume. The reporter asked for his name. Peter Henry Santos, the man replied. My blood ran cold. Santos. That was the last name Catherine had given me. A common enough name, I told myself, trying to calm the frantic beating in my heart. But the coincidence was too great to ignore. Peter, like my James. Then he told his story. He was 41 years old, the exact age my son would be. He was raised in Los Angeles by a woman named Mary Helen, who said she was a former church volunteer and had adopted him as a baby. She never wanted to talk much about the past or his biological family, always changed the subject when he asked. She loved me very much, gave me everything she could, he explained. But now that she's passed away, I found some strange documents among her things. Papers with another name, old photos that don't make sense. I started to suspect that my story isn't quite as she told it. The reporter asked what kind of documents. A birth certificate with erasures, a vaccination card with one name crossed out and another written over it, and a note with the name of a town, Malibu. Malibu, my town. I almost fell out of my chair. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it would burst out of my chest. The camera zoomed in on his face, and that's when I felt as if a lightning bolt had struck me. It was him, my son, my James, my baby, who was now a man. There was no way to explain how I knew, but I knew. A mother knows. I started crying so much I could barely see the television, but I heard him say that the woman who raised him had passed away 6 months ago from cancer. That despite his suspicions, he was grateful for everything she did for him, that he had had a good life, a good education. He was an engineer, married, a father of 2. But now I want to know the truth, he said, looking directly at the camera. If anyone recognizes my story, if anyone knows who I really am, please contact the station. At the end of the report, they showed a photo of the woman who raised him. It was a somewhat old photo, from the 90s, when Peter Henry was about 15, the two of them side by side, smiling. She was older, with graying hair, a bit heavier than I remembered. But those eyes, that way of smiling sideways, it was her, Catherine, just using another name. When the report ended, I sat there, paralyzed for I don't know how long. My neighbor, Mrs. Linda, found me like that when she came to bring me a piece of cake. She said I was white as a sheet, with my eyes glazed over at the turned-off television. Eleanor? What is it, woman? Are you feeling ill? I couldn't answer properly. I just pointed at the television and stammered, My son is alive. Mrs. Linda thought I was delirious, poor thing. She made me lie down, brought me water with sugar, was worried I was having some health problem because of my age. But I knew it wasn't delirium. It was real. After 40 years, I had seen my son. I stayed up all night, replaying every detail of the report in my head. The age matched, the story matched, the appearance matched. And that woman in the photo was, without a doubt, the Catherine who had taken my baby, only now I knew she hadn't harmed him. She hadn't killed him, hadn't abandoned him, as I had so feared in the early years. She had raised him as her son. She had given him love, education, a good life. This didn't justify what she did. Stealing a child from his mother is unforgivable. But it brought me enormous relief to know that my son hadn't suffered. The next morning, very early, I went to my niece's house, Jessica. She's my late sister's daughter and the only close relative I have left. She lives about 3 blocks from my house. She's a teacher, educated, understands this internet stuff. Auntie, are you sure? She asked, concerned. It's been so long. It could just be a coincidence. I'm sure, Jessica, it's my son, I know it is. She felt sorry for me, you could see it in her eyes. She thought I was just a confused old lady clinging to false hopes. But she helped me anyway. She called the television station, explained the situation. They said they would pass our contact information to the young man, but it was up to him to call back. We also searched the internet. Jessica found Peter Henry on social media. He was indeed an engineer, worked for a big company in Los Angeles. He had a beautiful wife, 2 children, a boy about 10 and a little girl about 5. He looked happy, fulfilled. I stared at those photos for hours. My son, my James, now Peter Henry, a grown man with his own family, a whole life that happened far away from me. So many birthdays, graduations, important moments that I missed. I was afraid to contact him directly. What if he didn't believe me? What if he got angry? After all, as far as he knew, he had been abandoned by his biological mother and saved by Catherine. Who's to say she hadn't told him a completely different story, painting me as a terrible mother who didn't want her own child? Jessica suggested I write a letter. Something more formal, respectful, explaining my side of the story without directly accusing the woman he considered his mother. After all, she had already passed away, and he seemed to have fond memories of her. I spent days writing and rewriting that letter. How do you summarize 40 years of pain, of searching, of hope in a few pages? How do you tell a grown man that the woman he loved as a mother had actually stolen him from someone else? In the end, it was a simple, honest letter. I told him about his birth, about how Catherine, or Mary Helen as he knew her, had come to work in my house, and about the day of the disappearance. I described the few photos I had of him as a baby, and mentioned a distinctive birthmark behind his right ear. I included a copy of his original birth certificate and a current photo of me. I told him I kept everything, waiting for the day I could show them to him in person. We sent the letter to the address the station gave us, with a return receipt requested. And then began the most agonizing wait of my life. Every day felt like an eternity. Did he receive it? Did he read it? Did he believe it? Or did he throw it away, thinking it was just another crazy person trying to get close to someone who appeared on television? I prayed every night. God, if it is your will, let my son know the truth. Let him at least hear my story. Even if he doesn't want to know me, let him know he was never abandoned, that he was loved from the very first day. And then, almost 3 weeks later, my phone rang. I sent a letter, then a message, then a prayer. That's how I tried to reach him, with all the care in the world. Because when you wait 40 years for someone, the fear of scaring that person away is almost as great as the desire to hug them. When the phone rang that afternoon, I was taking clothes off the line. Funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? It all started with a clothesline, and now another important moment in my life was happening while I was dealing with laundry in the yard. I ran inside, my hands wet, my heart in my throat. I answered, "Hello? Hello, I'd like to speak with Miss Eleanor, please." The male voice on the other end was polite, formal. A voice I didn't know, but that somehow stirred something inside me. "This is she." Silence. A sigh. "Ma'am, my name is Peter Henry. You sent me a letter last week. My legs went weak, I had to sit down, it was him. My son, talking to me after 40 years. Yes, I did." My voice was trembling so much it barely came out. Did you receive it?" "I did. I've read it several times, to be honest." He paused. "It's a very powerful story." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask 1,000 things, tell him 1,000 more. I wanted to cry, to shout for joy, but I stayed quiet, waiting, afraid to say the wrong thing and have him hang up. "I have to be honest, Miss Eleanor. I don't know if I fully believe your version. My mother, the woman who raised me, Mary Helen, would never have harmed me. She was a good, dedicated person." "I understand," I said softly. "It must be hard to believe. But it's the truth, son. Please, don't call me that." "Not yet," he requested, his voice becoming a little more tense. "We don't know if this story is true." That hurt like a knife. Not being able to call my own son. But I understood. To him, I was just a stranger, making a terrible accusation against the woman he had loved his whole life as a mother. "I'm sorry," I replied. "I'll respect your space." There was another silence. I could hear his breathing on the other end, thinking, calculating. "I have some questions," he finally said. "Things only the real mother would know. You can ask me anything." And so began a delicate interrogation. When exactly was he born? The 15th of June, 1982, around 7 in the evening. Did he have any birthmarks? A light-colored spot behind his right ear in the shape of a half-moon. What was the name of the hospital? I explained he wasn't born in a hospital, but at home with a home birth attendant. What was the father's full name? Robert Michael Thompson, a truck driver who never met his son. With each correct answer, I felt him becoming more intrigued. Some things he confirmed were correct, others he kept to himself. But I could feel that something was changing. "Ma'am, the letter I received had a photo of a baby. Is that really the only one you have?" "Yes, son." "I'm sorry, Mr. Peter. Back then, it wasn't like today where everyone takes pictures of everything. It was expensive to develop film. I only have 3 photos of my James as a baby. The one I sent is the best one, where you can see his little face clearly." "James?" He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting the sound. "My mother, Mary Helen, always called me Peter. She said James was my middle name, but that no one used it. My heart leaped. She had kept part of the name, maybe by mistake, maybe out of some remnant of conscience. There's something I didn't put in the letter," I said, gathering my courage. "Something I've kept all these years." "What?" "The booties. You had a pair of blue crochet booties. It was the first thing I made when I found out I was pregnant. They were put away. Catherine didn't take them, maybe because they were too small. You weren't wearing them anymore." Silence on the other end. A heavy silence. My mother, Mary Helen, kept a pair of blue crochet booties in a wooden box. She said they were the first booties I ever wore. I felt a shiver run through my entire body. It was a connection, tangible proof. Her eyes would get teary when she showed them, he continued, his voice softer now. She said they were special, that they reminded her of when I was tiny. I never understood why that specific pair of booties moved her so much. "Because she knew she wasn't the one who made them," I replied gently. "She knew that those booties were the symbol of what she had done, of who she had taken you from." More silence. Then I heard a deep sigh. "Miss Eleanor, I don't know what to think. Part of me wants to believe you, because it would explain a lot of strange things I've always felt. Another part doesn't want to believe, because it would mean the woman I loved my whole life stole me, lied, did something terrible. I understand, Peter. I truly do. And I don't want to tarnish her memory for you. From what I saw on television, and from what you say, she loved you very much, raised you well. As much anger as I've felt towards her all these years, I'm grateful for that." I heard a muffled sound on the other end, as if he were wiping away tears. The thought of my son crying and me not being able to hug him was unbearable. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. "Just to know you," I answered sincerely. "To know you're okay, to be able to see your face, even if it's just once. I don't want money. I don't want to ruin your life. I don't want you to choose between me and her memory. I just want to fill this 40-year void. I have a family, Miss Eleanor, a wife, children. I don't know how they would react to all of this. I know. I saw the photos on the internet. Your children are beautiful. They look a lot like you did as a baby." He seemed surprised. "You looked me up on the internet?" "My niece did, after we saw the report. I hope you don't mind. We just wanted to be sure it was you before sending the letter." There was a pause. Then he said, "I think we need to meet in person. There are things I need to ask you, looking into your eyes. And maybe do a DNA test. Not out of distrust, but to be absolutely sure." Of course, I replied quickly. "Whatever you want, whenever you want." We arranged to meet the following week. He would come to Malibu. We chose a public place, the Central Plaza near the church. Neutral, safe for both of us. After I hung up the phone, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. But they were different tears, not of despair, as they had been so many times before, but of relief, of hope. The chance to finally see my son, even if he didn't yet recognize me as his mother. The days that followed were filled with an anxiety that almost left me breathless. Jessica, my niece, came over every day, helped me choose clothes, tidy up the house in case he wanted to come over, prepare what to say. "Auntie, take it easy," she advised. "Don't get your hopes up too high, he might need time." But how could I not get my hopes up? It was my son, my baby, who was now a grown man. My own flesh and blood who had been torn from me, and who now, by a miracle, I had a chance to meet again. On the eve of the meeting, I barely slept. I kept looking at the old photos, the blue crochet booties I had saved all these years. I prayed so much, asking for strength, asking for God to soften his heart, to allow him to see the truth in my eyes. On the morning of the meeting, my hands were trembling so much, I could barely button my dress. I chose a simple, light blue one. I've always liked blue. I didn't want to wear much makeup. I wanted him to see my face as it is, with the wrinkles that life and sadness have given me. Jessica drove me to the plaza. I could have walked, it's not far from my house, but my legs were too weak. On the way, she tried to calm me down. "Breathe, Auntie. It's all going to be okay." But my heart felt like it was going to explode. 40 years of waiting coming to an end. 40 years of tears, of searching, of prayers. We arrived at the plaza 15 minutes before the scheduled time. Jessica helped me sit on a bench in the shade, gave me a glass of water, and moved away, as we had agreed. She would stay nearby but give us privacy for our meeting. And then, punctually at 10 a.m., I saw a silver car park on the other side of the plaza. The door opened, and he got out. My son was walking towards me. When he walked through the door, my heart started beating like it used to. That's how I felt that day in the plaza, when I saw my son walking towards me after 40 years. He came alone, tall, strong, with dark brown, neatly cut hair, a little gray at the temples. He was wearing blue slacks and a white long-sleeved shirt, even in the heat. He seemed nervous, looking around as if searching for an escape route in case he needed to flee. I was sitting on a bench under that big fig tree in the church plaza. When our eyes met, I felt as if time had stopped. It was as if I had waited for that moment my entire life. And, well, I had. He approached slowly. I wanted to get up, run to him, hug him with all my might, but I knew I had to be calm. To him, I was still a stranger, an elderly woman who claimed to be his mother, but who contradicted everything he had believed his entire life. "Miss Eleanor?" he asked, stopping about 2 steps away. "Yes," I replied, my voice almost gone. "Are you Peter?" It wasn't a question. I would recognize my son anywhere, at any age. There are things a mother knows in the depths of her soul. He stood there, not knowing what to do. He didn't offer his hand, didn't come any closer. He just nodded his head and said, "Can we talk?" "Of course, son. I'm sorry, Mr. Peter." It was still hard not to call him son. "Do you want to sit here?" He sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. He placed a folder he was carrying on his lap and was silent for a few seconds, as if organizing his thoughts. "I brought some things," he finally said, opening the folder. "Documents, photos, things that might help us understand this whole situation." The first thing he took out was a birth certificate. It was yellowed with time, with some stains, and visibly altered. You could see that a name had been erased and another written over it. "This is the certificate she kept," he explained. "I always thought it was strange, but she said the county clerk had made a mistake and had to correct it." Then he showed a vaccination card. The name James was crossed out, and above it was written Peter Henry. The date of birth was the same, the 10th of April, 1982. "When I found these documents after she passed away, I started to get suspicious," he continued. "She never talked about my father, just said he was a boyfriend who didn't want to take responsibility. She said she raised me alone from day one." As he spoke, I couldn't take my eyes off his face. I searched for traces of the baby I knew, of my James. They were there, in the shape of his eyes, his chin, the way he furrowed his brow when he was concentrating, exactly like his father used to do. "You said in the letter that you have pictures of me as a baby," he said. "Can I see them?" I took a small envelope from my purse with the few photos I had kept all these years. I handed it to him with trembling hands. He looked at each one carefully. The first, when James was about 3 months old, in my sister's arms. The second, him at 6 months, sitting on a blanket on the floor, laughing at the camera. "Is this her?" he asked, pointing to Catherine in the photo. "Yes," I replied. "That's what Catherine looked like when she worked in my house." He fell silent, staring intently at the image. Then, with slow movements, he took another photo from the folder, a more recent photo of a middle-aged woman, with graying hair, a fuller face, but with the same eyes, the same smile. "This is Mary Helen, the woman who raised me." I looked at the photo and had no doubt. It was her, Catherine, older, different, but unmistakably her. "It's her," I confirmed, feeling a tightness in my chest. "It's Catherine." He put the photos back in the folder, took a deep breath, and finally looked directly into my eyes. "Why would she do that?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Why steal another woman's child? She didn't seem like a bad person. She raised me with love, gave me an education, never mistreated me." "I don't know, son. Peter," I replied honestly. "I never understood. She was a quiet, religious girl. She took good care of you, but there was something, an attachment that didn't seem normal, as if you were hers, not mine." "She never had other children," he commented. "She said she couldn't, that I was her miracle." That explained a lot. A woman who couldn't have children, who worked with children, who became too attached to a baby she was caring for, who decided to take for herself what wasn't hers. "You look a lot like your father," I said softly. "Robert. He was a truck driver. He didn't stick around to meet you, but you have his eyes, his gaze. He seemed surprised." She always said I looked like her side of the family, that I had my grandfather's eyes. Another lie, built up over the years. A lifetime of fabricated stories to hide the truth. We were silent for a while, just letting it all sink in. Two people connected by blood, separated by fate, trying to understand the puzzle of their lives. "I brought one more thing," he said finally. He opened a smaller compartment in the folder and took out something wrapped in a handkerchief. It was the blue crochet bootie, identical to the one I kept at home, just a little more faded, more handled over the years. "She would cry when she showed me this," he recounted. "She said it was special. Now I understand why." At that moment, I felt that he was beginning to believe, that the truth was becoming real for him, no matter how painful. "I want to do a DNA test," he said, putting the booty away. "Not that I doubt you, but I need to be absolutely sure." "Of course," I agreed. "Whatever you need." "I don't know how to deal with all this," he confessed, running a hand over his tired face. "The woman who raised me, who I loved my whole life as a mother, was a kidnapper. She stole a child. She stole me from you." He looked so lost, so confused. I wanted to hug him, to comfort him like I did when he was a baby, but there was still a wall between us, a wall of 40 years of separation. "I don't know if I can forgive her," he continued. "But I also don't know if I can condemn her. She loved me, she protected me. I never lacked for anything." "I understand," I replied, and I really did. As much anger as I had felt for Catherine all these years, knowing she had taken good care of my son, brought a strange comfort. "I don't want you to hate her. I just want you to know the truth. And the truth is, you are my biological mother." He didn't say it as a question, but as a statement, a truth he was beginning to accept. My eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I am your mother," I almost whispered. "Son." But I held back. It was still too soon. He stood up, putting the documents back in the folder. He seemed overwhelmed, as if he needed space to process everything. "I have to go," he said. "I'm going to arrange the DNA test. My wife is waiting for me at the hotel. She doesn't know everything yet. I need to tell her first, before making any decisions." I understood. It was a lot to take in at once. A whole life crumbling and another being rebuilt at the same time. "Can I call you tomorrow?" he asked, already moving away. "Of course," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment at seeing him leave so quickly. "Any time." He nodded, took 2 more steps, then stopped and turned around. "One last thing," he said. "My name. You called me James." "Yes," I replied. "James Michael. James for my father, Michael for your father's father. It was the name I chose for you." He thought for a moment, then said softly, as if trying it out, "James Michael." And then he was gone, walking quickly across the plaza without looking back. I sat there for a long time, crying silently. They weren't just tears of sadness, but also of relief, of hope. My son was alive, he was well, and now he knew the truth. Jessica came to get me after a while. She asked how it went, and I could only say, "He's beautiful, Jessica, and he has his father's eyes." I went home and waited. Waited for the phone call that would decide if, after 40 years, I would finally have my son back. I cried so much I washed away 40 years of guilt. That's how I felt when I opened that envelope with the DNA test results. The letters danced before my eyes as I tried to understand the scientific terms, but there it was, crystal clear. Probability of maternity, 99.998%. After that first meeting in the plaza, Peter, who I now knew was truly my James, took 3 days to call me again. They were the 3 longest days of my life. Jessica stayed with me the whole time, afraid I would get sick with anxiety. When he finally called, his voice was different, calmer, more resolute. "Miss Eleanor, I found a lab here in Los Angeles that does the DNA test. We can do it tomorrow if you can come." "Yes, I'll be there," I replied without a second thought. I would have gone to the end of the earth if necessary. Jessica drove me to Los Angeles the next day. It was almost a 2-hour drive, but I didn't even feel the time pass. I just thought about the moment I would see my son again. The lab was a modern place with white walls and people in lab coats rushing around. Peter was already there when we arrived, talking to a young woman at the reception. Next to him stood a woman I didn't know, beautiful, about 40, with brown hair tied in a ponytail. "This is my wife, Sophia," he introduced. I told her everything. I thought it was important for her to be here. The woman looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Eleanor. Peter told me your story. It must have been very difficult." That gesture, bringing his wife, introducing her to me, gave me a hope I hadn't felt since I saw him on television. It meant that regardless of the result, he was considering including me in his life in some way. The test itself was simple. A cheek swab, some papers to sign, and it was done. They told us the results would be ready in 2 weeks. "Are you going back to Malibu today?" Peter asked as we left the lab. "Yes," Jessica drove me. He exchanged a look with his wife, who nodded discreetly. "Before you go, we'd like to have lunch with you. There's a restaurant nearby. We could talk a little more." During lunch, he asked me many questions about the past. What I was like before he was born, what the pregnancy was like, what his first months were like. Sophia asked if I had photos, and I showed her the few I had brought with me. "Look, honey," she said to Peter, holding one of the photos. "He has the same chin as Liam." "Liam is our oldest son," Peter explained. "He's 10, and we also have Ava, who's 5. My grandchildren. I had grandchildren. Children who carried my blood, who had my baby's DNA running through their veins. I could barely contain my emotion. "Do they know about me?" I asked shyly. "Not yet," Peter replied. "We're waiting for the test results. But if it's positive, yes, we'll tell them in the most age-appropriate way." Of course. The following 2 weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. I returned to Malibu with a lighter heart, but still afraid. What if the test came back negative? What if, by some cruel twist of fate, I was wrong? But deep down, I knew. A mother knows. Peter called me every 2 or 3 days. They weren't long conversations, but they were significant. He asked about my life, my past. He wanted to know about his grandparents, my parents, who had passed away long ago. He wanted to know the history of the family he never knew he had. One night, he told me he had gone to the county records office to research his original birth certificate. "They found it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "James Michael Thompson, born on the 10th of April, 1982, son of Eleanor Thompson, father not declared. The record was never legally cancelled. I have 2 names, 2 identities. It was the first time I felt he was truly accepting the truth, even before the official result. When the day of the results finally arrived, Peter called me early in the morning. "I'm picking it up this afternoon. Do you want me to call as soon as I know, or would you prefer I come to Malibu?" "Whatever you prefer, son," I replied, the word son slipping out naturally this time. He didn't correct me. "I'll come there," he decided. "I think it's something we should see together, whatever the result." He arrived in the late afternoon, alone this time. He was carrying an envelope in his hands. We sat in the living room of my house, the same house he had been taken from 40 years earlier. "I haven't opened it yet," he said, showing me the sealed envelope. I wanted us to be together. With trembling hands, he tore open the envelope and unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the lines, stopping at some point on the document. I saw his lips move silently, reading and rereading. Then he lifted his eyes to me. They were full of tears. "It's positive," he said simply. 99.998% certainty. You are my biological mother." It was as if a weight of 40 years was lifted from my shoulders in that instant. I began to cry, sobbing with relief, with joy, with accumulated pain that was finally finding an escape. Peter was crying too. For the first time since we reconnected, he came closer and hugged me. A strong, tight hug, as if he wanted to make up for all the hugs we hadn't shared over 4 decades. "Mom," he whispered in my ear, the sweetest word I had ever heard in my life. In that moment, I forgave Catherine. Not for what she did stealing a child will never have forgiveness, but for how she raised him. She had taken good care of my boy, had made him a good, educated, loving man. And in the end, she couldn't keep the lie forever. The truth found its way. The following months were about rebuilding. Peter started coming to Malibu regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sophia. 3 months after the result, he brought the children. I'll never forget the day I met my grandchildren. Liam, serious and observant like his grandfather, and Ava, a chatterbox who didn't stay still for a second. Peter had explained the situation simply, that I was his biological mother, that he was raised by someone else, and that we had now found each other. "So, you're our real grandma?" Liam asked, direct as only a child can be. "Yes, I am," I replied, my heart overflowing. "Cool," exclaimed Ava. "Now we have 3 grandmas, Grandma Susan, Grandma Mary Helen, who's in heaven, and Grandma Eleanor." The simplicity with which the children accepted everything was a lesson. No judgments, no grudges, just the joy of having someone else to love. Today, 2 years after our reunion, I have a close relationship with my son and his family. Peter decided to keep the name he used his whole life. After all, it's who he became. But now he knows his true origin. Sometimes he calls me Mom, other times Miss Eleanor. It's all okay. We're building our path, without rushing. The truth is, God works in mysterious ways. The pain I carried for 40 years will never completely disappear. The nights of crying, the desperate search, the years of loneliness, all of that is part of who I am. Catherine stole away my precious son, but after all, God gave me back the man he had become. Today, I am not only a mother who lost her child, but also the mother of a wonderful man and the grandmother of 2 incredibly lovely grandchildren. And that is the message I want to send to you, the one listening to this story. If you are also carrying within you a seemingly endless pain, a seemingly hopeless weight, please, never give up. Believe that truth and miracles do exist. They may come late, at a moment you least expect, but they will surely come. Our channel was created to honor stories just like this. Here, we believe that every person is a story worth hearing, and every story that is told is a moment of soothed pain. Because some wounds only truly begin to heal when we dare to touch them with words. If Mrs. Eleanor's story has touched your heart, Please join us in spreading these values. Press like to empower these messages of hope. Leave a comment to share your feelings, because every shared thought is a precious act of empathy. And most importantly, subscribe and follow the channel so you don't miss any other true and moving stories. Thank you for listening to an old woman recount the most painful, and yet, in the end, the most sacred and blessed story of her life.